The year it happened didn't look like a disaster at first. It felt more like a slow bruise spreading under the skin of an entire society. Quiet, invisible, and then suddenly impossible to ignore. Prices didn't rise, they detonated. One morning, a family walked into a grocery store expecting the usual routine, and walked out stunned, holding a receipt that looked like a medical bill. Overnight, food had become a luxury. Gas felt like a ransom note. Electricity bills read like threats. It wasn't just numbers going up. It was the air tightening around millions of people at once. What made it terrifying wasn't the shock itself, but the speed. Inflation is supposed to creep. This was a jailbreak. It came crashing through the doors of every household, uninvited, unapologetic, unstoppable. You could feel the panic vibrate in the lines outside supermarkets, in the way people stared at price tags as if they might blink and change again. In the trembling pause before someone swiped their card, praying it wouldn't decline. It was the kind of tension that makes a civilization feel brittle. And yet, the experts told us not to worry. They told us it was temporary, transitory, just a blip. But the blip swallowed an entire year. Then it swallowed the next. Wages stayed still, while everything else sprinted ahead. Suddenly, saving money felt like trying to hold water in bare hands. The harder you tried, the faster it slipped away. People began to notice the quieter signs of decay. Shelves that once overflowed now looked half empty. Brands shrank their portions but kept their prices. Landlords increased rent faster than salaries could breathe. Even those who thought they were safe, professionals, homeowners, savers, felt something shifting beneath their feet. A realization crept in. This wasn't a market correction. It was a system malfunctioning in real time. But the most haunting part was the sense of inevitability. The feeling that this moment had been building for years, maybe decades. Like a fault line everyone ignored until the ground finally split open. The news anchors said it was the pandemic, the supply chains, the war, the weather, anything but the system itself. Anything but the possibility that this sudden, violent surge in prices was not an accident, but a breaking point engineered by forces nobody voted for and nobody could escape. Parents cut back on meals so their kids could eat. Retirees returned to work because their life savings were dissolving. Couples abandoned dreams of a home because the mortgage calculators had turned into instruments of cruelty. Every day felt like a negotiation with an invisible enemy, one that kept raising its demands. And then came the silence. The moment when millions of people collectively understood. This wasn't a temporary spike. It was a permanent shift, a lock clicking shut. The truth arrived slowly, but hit with the force of catastrophe. We were not living through a phase. We were living through a rupture, the kind that marks the beginning of a new era or the end of an old one. It wasn't just that prices were rising. It was that the world we recognized was evaporating, replaced by something colder, harsher, more controlled. Something had pushed the system past its limit. Something had snapped. And whatever it wasn't done with us yet. Every empire tells the same story before it dies. The details change, the costumes change, the languages and flags change, but the pattern never does. It always begins with prosperity, with confidence, with a belief that the center will hold forever. And then, quietly at first, the corrosion begins. Not from invaders or storms or famine, but from within the currency itself. Rome was the first great warning. When its armies stretched across continents and its wealth dazzled the world, its leaders made a fatal decision. Instead of raising taxes or cutting spending, they diluted their own money. A silver denarius that once held real value began to carry less metal, less purity, less trust. Citizens didn't notice at first. The coin looked the same. But beneath the surface, the substance was disappearing. Prices crept upward. Then, they surged. Bread riots erupted. The empire insisted everything was under control. until control was the one thing they no longer had. Centuries later, the British Empire repeated the ritual. Costs of war piled up, debt ballooned, and the pound, once the most respected currency on Earth, was quietly weakened to keep the illusion alive. The public paid more for less. Wealth flowed upward, power concentrated, and ordinary people felt the weight of decisions made in distant rooms they would never enter. History didn't stop there. From the French monarchy before the Revolution to the American government during the 1970s, every major power facing internal decay turned to the same trick: weaken the currency to strengthen the illusion of stability. They told the public it was necessary, temporary, harmless. They always said the same words, and the outcome was always the same too: inflation, unrest, loss of trust, and eventually, collapse. The pattern is brutally consistent. When an empire cannot produce enough, it prints. When it cannot balance its books, it inflates. When it cannot face the consequences, it hides them in the price of everything people need to live. Economists like to call this monetary expansion, fiscal stimulus, or structural adjustments. But history calls it something simpler: the last gasp of a system that has run out of honest options. In every era, leaders had a choice: confront reality or distort the currency. They always chose distortion.
Price increases are temporary.
It bought them time.
This is
it bought them
the market
obedience.
Adjusting.
It bought them
Inflation
silence.
is under control.
But it also planted a fuse that would one day ignite the entire structure they were trying to preserve. What made this pattern so dangerous isn't just the manipulation of money. It's the manipulation of perception. The rulers of old knew that as long as citizens believed everything was normal, the decay could continue unchecked. So they told them what our experts tell us now. These price increases are temporary. This is just the market adjusting. Inflation is under control. These reassurances have echoed through every era, spoken by men who knew they wouldn't be around when the bill finally came due. Ordinary people paid that bill, every time. Rome's citizens lost their savings. Britain's workers lost their purchasing power. America, in the 1970s, watched the dollar dissolve in their hands. In each case, the public shouldered the burden, while those at the top protected themselves with land, assets, influence. The cycle is not a theory. It is a law of empire. When those in charge exhaust their wealth, they reach for yours, quietly, invisibly, through the slow poison of rising prices. And once that process begins, it does not reverse. It accelerates. Like a storm pulling a ship toward a whirlpool, the weakening of currency leads to the weakening of trust. And the weakening of trust leads to the weakening of the entire structure holding society together. This is the part of the story where empires pretend everything is fine. It is also the part where history whispers, "Look closely, you've seen this before." What's unfolding today feels chaotic, unpredictable, unprecedented, but it isn't. It's the same story humanity has watched a dozen times, only this version is running at double speed. What used to unravel over centuries now happens in years. What once took decades now plays out in months. The past is no longer behind us. It's layered directly on top of the present, like two films projected onto the same screen. It started with the money printers, though we didn't call them that. We called them relief programs, stimulus packages, emergency measures. Under the pressure of a global shutdown, governments around the world created the largest surge of new money in modern history. Trillions appeared out of nowhere, injected into financial veins already swollen from years of cheap credit. It was presented as salvation, but salvation always has a cost, and this time, the bill arrived quickly. The first signs were subtle. A cup of coffee cost more. A used car cost more than a new one had the year before. Rent climbed like a fever. But once the dam cracked, the flood followed. Prices didn't merely rise, they spiraled, feeding off each other in a chain reaction that
And
felt
there's another
eerily
parallel,
familiar
even
to
more
anyone who had
dangerous.
studied the final
Debt.
chapters of past empires. The parallels were unavoidable. Rome weakened its silver content. Modern nations weakened their purchasing power through digital creation. The British Empire borrowed and inflated to maintain global influence. Today's superpowers borrow at scales that make past empires look frugal. Even the language is the same. Leaders insist the currency is strong, the economy resilient, the inflation temporary. The script has not changed, only the speed at which it unfolds. And there's another parallel, even more dangerous: debt. Every fading empire drowned in it. They borrowed to maintain lifestyles, wars, illusions. Today, national debts have soared to levels that previous civilizations couldn't have imagined, not even in their final gasps. Governments promise to pay, but with what? From whom? Using money worth how much? Meanwhile, central banks raise interest rates in a desperate attempt to cool the fire they helped ignite. But raising rates is a double-edged blade. It slows inflation by strangling the economy beneath it. Families feel it first. Mortgages doubling, credit card balances ballooning, dreams shrinking. Businesses feel it next. Layoffs, closures, the slow suffocation of the middle class. It's the same mechanic that ended the Gilded Ages of old. The weight of debt becomes too heavy to carry, and the system buckles. But perhaps the most chilling parallel is psychological. In every past collapse, a moment arrived when people stopped believing their leaders, their institutions, their currency. When they realized the system wasn't built to protect them, but to extract from them. That moment is returning, quietly, uneasily. You can hear it in conversations at grocery stores, in the hum of social media panic, in the exhaustion on people's faces when they look at another inflated bill. And yet, something is different this time: the acceleration. Technology has amplified every rise, every fall, every panic. Social networks spread fear faster than any printing press. Markets react in seconds, not seasons. Money moves at the speed of code. When a system this interconnected cracks, it doesn't crumble slowly, it snaps. History is no longer a distant echo, it's a mirror, and the reflection is becoming impossible to ignore. The same pattern of currency distortion, debt expansion, and institutional denial is unfolding again, but the clock is moving faster than ever recorded. We aren't watching a new crisis, we're watching an old one return with a vengeance. And the terrifying truth is this: we haven't reached the climax yet. We're only approaching the point where past and present meet, where the lesson becomes unavoidable. The script is the same, only the timeline has changed. For years, we were told a comforting story. Prices rise because inflation happens, because markets adjust, because global events create pressure. 1,000 explanations, all pointing everywhere except the one place that mattered. But when you peel back the layers, strip away the jargon, the press conferences, the technical distractions, you find something far more deliberate. Inflation was never an accident. It was a mechanism, a siphon, a tool. The real story begins in rooms without windows, where central bankers speak a language designed not to inform, but to obscure. They claim to be guardians of stability, yet they possess the one power no democratic institution should ever hold: the ability to create money from nothing. And every time they do, something is extracted from everyone who already holds money. A transfer occurs, silent, invisible, irreversible. People think inflation raises prices, but inflation doesn't make things more expensive. It makes your money worth less. And when your money is worth less, someone else's assets become more valuable relative to yours. That someone is never the factory worker, the teacher, the single parent, the retiree. It is always the same group. The well-connected, the
Corporations
asset-rich,
joined in too.
the institutions
Many raised prices
closest
far
to the
beyond their
money
rising
spigot.
costs, using inflation
Governments
as cover.
run deficits.
They called it
Banks
pricing
expand
power.
credit. Corporations borrow billions at near zero interest. And all of them feed on a system where newly created money enters at the top before trickling down in diluted form to everyone else. By the time it reaches ordinary people, the value has already been bled out. This is not inflation. This is extraction. Consider what happened after the global money surge. Asset prices exploded. Stocks, real estate, commodities. But salaries barely moved. Ordinary people paid more for groceries, while billionaires added tens of billions to their net worth in a single year. The media called it market dynamics. History calls it the harvest, a predictable reallocation of wealth upward, disguised as economic fluctuation. Corporations joined in too. Many raised prices far beyond their rising costs, using inflation as cover. They called it pricing power. In truth, it was opportunistic synchronization, a quiet agreement that this was the moment to extract more from a captive population struggling just to stay afloat.
Not their enemy.
Earnings soared, while households suffocated. Record profits during a cost of living crisis isn't a coincidence. It's the point. And then there's the government. Every major power in history discovered the same temptation. If you can't tax people openly, you tax them silently through inflation. It is the perfect weapon because no one votes on it. No one debates it. No one even sees it happening until it's too late. Citizens blame corporations. Corporations blame supply chains. Supply chains blame global shocks. Meanwhile, the architects of the system watch the illusion play out, untouched. The most disturbing revelation is this. The system is designed so that the pain accumulates at the bottom while the benefits accumulate at the top. Every printed dollar, every bailout, every manipulated interest rate is a lever pulled not to stabilize society, but to stabilize the wealth of a shrinking elite who depend on inflation to maintain their dominance. When empires dilute their currency, it is not to save the people, it is to preserve the hierarchy. We were told inflation was an enemy the government was fighting, but inflation is not their enemy, it is their instrument. It keeps citizens dependent, exhausted, easy to manage. It forces people to work more just to stand still, to borrow more just to access the basics, to surrender more of their future in exchange for survival today. A population under financial pressure is a population that cannot resist. This was never about rising prices. It was about rising control. And once you see that, once you understand that inflation is not a malfunction, but a strategy, the entire narrative collapses. The blame shifts. The illusion dissolves. The truth stands naked. They didn't lose control of the system. They used the system. And the extraction isn't slowing, it's accelerating. The truth is hard to face. Once a system begins extracting more than it creates, collapse feels inevitable. Prices rise, trust erodes, wealth concentrates, and society fractures into those who can navigate the storm and those who are swallowed by it.
Inflation is natural.
But history
Debt
offers
is
a
harmless.
quieter lesson, hidden
Experts
beneath the
will
rubble
fix
of
it.
fallen empires. Collapse is not guaranteed. What is guaranteed is the trap that forms when people fail to understand the forces shaping their lives. The trap is psychological before it is economic. It convinces people that nothing can be done, that the system is too large, too complex, too permanent to challenge. It whispers that inflation is natural, that debt is harmless, that the experts will fix everything eventually. It numbs the population into waiting for relief checks, for wage increases, for politicians to deliver the miracle they promised. Waiting is the cage, and the longer a society waits, the tighter it closes. But cracks appear when people begin to see inflation for what it truly is, Not a mysterious force of nature, but a deliberate redistribution of power. Once that realization spreads, the elite lose their strongest weapon, an uninformed public. Knowledge does not reverse the damage, but it does change the trajectory. It transforms citizens from passengers into participants, from victims into navigators. Every empire that survived its monetary crisis did so because ordinary people changed their relationship with money, how they saved, how they spent, how they protected themselves. They refused to play the game blindly. They adapted. They diversified. They stored value in ways the system couldn't dilute.
And slowly, quietly, they rebuilt resilience where the empire had allowed fragility to grow.
Today, the same possibility exists. The system may be rigged, but awareness is leverage. Understanding how money is created, how prices are distorted, how wealth is extracted. This knowledge becomes a shield against the next wave of instability. It empowers people to step outside the trap instead of sinking deeper into it. But make no mistake, the path forward is not gentle. The extraction machine won't stop by itself. Governments will keep creating money to pay debts they can't repay. Corporations will keep raising prices because they can. Banks will keep tightening and loosening credit in rhythms that favor themselves. The system will keep doing what it was built to do. What must change is us. When people stop believing the narrative loses its power. When they stop relying on institutions that fail them, those institutions face accountability. When they seek alternatives, whether new forms of money, new ways of storing wealth, or simply new habits of financial independence, the system feels pressure from below. And pressure from below is the only force in history that has ever reshaped the structures above. We cannot escape the storm, but we can learn to walk through it with our eyes open. The inevitability is not collapse. The inevitability is the choice. Stay in the trap or see it for what it is. If society chooses sight over silence, curiosity over compliance, knowledge over fear, then the next chapter does not have to repeat the same ending written in the ruins of past empires. Somewhere in the distance, between the fractures and the noise, a thin line of possibility remains. A narrow path leading away from extraction and toward autonomy. It is not promised. It is not easy, but it exists. And in an age built on illusions, simply knowing that the path is real is the beginning of freedom.